Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, City Council is sitting on land, 168 acres that they bought for $1 from the federal government. But there is a catch. They have to commit to how to use that land by the middle of next year. And they do have a plan to consolidate training facilities for police, fire, EMS, and more. Today, we are talking to a reporter about why some people have big reservations about that and what might happen next. It's Monday, August 18th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. I'm with Ember Duke, a reporter with Public Source. Welcome to CityCast Pittsburgh.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So tell us about the space that we're talking about. Like, where is it and what did it used to be?
So the building itself is in the Lincoln-Leamington-Belmar neighborhood. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit elevated from the actual residential areas. So it's not super easily accessible by the public. It was formerly a VA medical hospital for several decades. And then I believe it was 2013, I think, that they stopped using it for those purposes. And it has kind of just been left vacant since then.
Yeah, it's kind of north of the city. I feel like every time I've been by there, the only thing you can kind of see is the chains and a little sign that says don't go up here, or face prosecution.
Yeah, there, at least when our photographer went up to take pictures of the property, there were security guards and stuff. So it's really not accessible. There has been, when I was doing my research, some people who have gone in and done urban photography type of stuff.
The kind of thing where you jump the fence.
Yeah.
Go see what an abandoned thing looks like.
Right. Yeah. We did not want to get in legal trouble for that.
Of course. Well, tell us about the proposal for this space. I know it's evolved a lot since we acquired the property in 2021, but what's been on the table and what's on the table now?
The intent for it has kind of, evolved since 2021. It was originally acquired through applications to the General Services Administration for law enforcement and emergency response purposes. So we kind of are locked into this contract where, at least in the way that the language is now, it has to be used for those purposes.
So it has to be for police. That's how we originally applied to have the property?
Yeah, the language in the original land deed is law enforcement or emergency response. I think one of the big questions in council right now, and part of why they have put off the vote for it, is they're trying to figure out what exactly that means. Because there's obviously these concerns about, could that lead to militarized policing? So just trying to see what the boundaries of law enforcement and emergency response are, I think, is one of the big outstanding questions still. But back to your question, they are proposing for it to be a comprehensive public safety training facility. So that would be for police, firefighters, and EMS. Some of the city councilors have floated questions of, can that be including social workers as well? What are the bounds of public safety, really? But the primary, three primary ones would be EMS, firefighters, and police. It seems like a lot of people are hoping that priority will be given to the firefighters and EMS, just because they're in more dire need of new facilities and new training equipment, things like that.
Yeah, my understanding is that I'll use the Bureau of Police as an example, but I think the firefighters are certainly part of this too. They do all this training already. They just do it in 16 different spaces. One of them being right on Washington Boulevard, that big tall building that looks like it's been burned out because it has over and over and over again. That's how the firefighters train. It's right there next to the Zone 5 office. This would move a lot of that stuff up into the hill and away from where people have to watch. It is kind of scary. I've driven by there when they're doing an active practice with the fire is going. You wouldn't have to necessarily see that and think about that when you're just driving by or riding your bike.
Right. Yeah. It would kind of take these out of, the public eye. Exactly. But yeah, the burn tower was a big thing because the firefighters, a lot of times they're having to, traveled to Allison Park also to do their controlled burns, and they have, continual training like throughout the span of their career and stuff. So
Yeah.
it'll kind of be just putting everything in one place, basically, rather than this like scattered out training that is happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, like, on its face sounds sort of simple, utilitarian. Why does it scare people, though?
I think one of the big fears is the fact that it will be out of the public eye, that it's, I think accountability is a big question from, what I was hearing from people. And then also there's, similar training facilities that are popping up in a lot of other major cities. And a lot of the fear, I think, over this is coming from one in Atlanta, Georgia,
that's the one that everybody calls Cop City.
Right. That's kind of where the name came from.
Which is a facility that doesn't actually exist yet either, but it included a proposal to have like kind of a fake city, like street and scape, so that police could theoretically train on urban warfare tactics, which is like, that feels like a very big jump from what we're talking about here in Pittsburgh.
Right. Yeah. And the original proposal for Pittsburgh's facility back in 2021, like the application to the federal government did include language about a training village.
Okay.
Which, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of other information in the documents that I was able to read on it, but that a lot of people were concerned that that was going to be similar to the Atlanta facility.
Has that been backed off of since then?
It seems that way. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem like anybody on city council is, wants that to be in the plans. And in my conversations with people from the Office of Management and Budget, they've said that that's not in the language for this facility. But it's also in a weird spot where there's not really like anything written down yet. There's not like a, tangible plan. It's kind of theoretical still at this point.
Yeah, that's been my sense of this too. Like, it's been a lot of conversation for 4 years, but now we're running up against this deadline where we have to at least have like a quote unquote master plan by 2026, by June. Where do we stand with that right now?
Yeah, so they're still in the initial contracting phase. The vote that was diverted from council that they're going to be addressing after Labor Day is whether or not to contract with this firm, HDR, which has since, some concerns about them specifically have come up in some of their, tactics for dealing with people who are concerned about projects that they work on.
Yeah, it sounds like they do a level of social listening that is maybe above and beyond what some might consider normal for corporate industries.
Yeah.
So if you're not familiar with social listening, it can be as simple as monitoring a brand or a product or a service, like on social media, for example, like scraping public sentiment for how people feel about you, like what they're saying, who's talking about you, how they're using your product. But for a public project like this, it's useful for proponents because then you can get a sense of what might be necessary to get the public on your side. But it sounds like at least a few folks at HDR were maybe going too far or at minimum creeping people out.
It seemed pretty in depth and they weren't trying to hide it either. I mean, they have like all of that information on their website, but
it is a real service that like places will provide. And like HDR, I think, has done a lot of projects in like Pennsylvania and around here. I'm not surprised that that's a service they offer, but I also understand why people would be critical of it. Like, you don't necessarily want someone infiltrating your Facebook group to figure out how you're upset about something so that they can then try to message to you. It feels weird.
Right. Yeah. And they had actually a civil lawsuit out of Arizona against them for these services. The suit alleged that they were wiretapping, private Facebook groups. So yeah, there's definitely a concern that was brought up, and I think that that's something that the city might have realized a little late into the process. It seemed like it wasn't until after the vote was kind of brought to council this time around that...
Meaning we're about to take on this contractor, they're going to do our master plan, we're going to figure all this out, and then somebody pumps the brakes. They're like, wait a second, have you heard about this company though?
Yes. Yeah.
Somebody stopped to Google them.
Yes. Yes.
So what's the conversation in council right now? I know they're on recess, but where did it stand the last time you talked to folks?
It seemed like they, wanted to do more research. I think that there was a lot of talk about, doing it right. And there's definitely, they seemed a lot more weary the second time it came up in council than when it was originally proposed like 2 weeks before that. So it seems like they're at least listening to people and to people's concerns. And the big thing specifically that Councilwoman Deb Gross had mentioned was just figuring out what the legal language can look like. What does the contract with whatever firm they choose look like?
Yeah, because I think city council has it within their power to say, we do not want this service. Don't do that.
Yeah.
And we're not going to pay for it.
Right.
So I guess what happens next? Like what's possible, at least for the next few, months leading up to this big 2026 deadline?
I think that the city and I would imagine council are probably, eager to figure this out so that they don't lose the land. I think that there is, a shared concern about not having ownership of the property, not having, being able to say what goes there.
Because I think that's the stakes, right? Like if we don't decide what we're doing, we could either have to give it back or we could have to pay for it. And we only paid $1 the first time. So like having to pay for 168 acres when our budget is already kind of not great, that could be a lot of money.
Right. Yeah. And they haven't had it assessed or anything. They don't know how much that could be. So that is definitely, I think, on their side, the stakes for this. But, a lot of people are saying that that's not a good enough reason to be pushing this forward so quickly. But I think what happens next is probably, it'll come back to council. I'm sure people will show up again to voice their opposition. I think it has been kind of a moment of like conversation between city council and people who have concerns.
I guess this goes without saying, but does public safety want this?
Everyone I've talked to from public safety, I talked to the fire union vice president and the president of the police union, and they're both in favor of it. I mean, they were saying their facilities aren't up to, the standards that they need for training, and that it would just overall be better for the public to have, better facilities in a new location.
Is there anything that prevents them, as far as from putting things like, counseling services or, some of these like crisis response teams that are civilian, they're not police led? Like it seems like that is a thing that could be put on an enormous campus that we're planning on building anyway, but maybe I'm being naive.
Maybe I'm also being naive. I think that could be a possibility. I think that public safety is a broad definition, probably. I think it would take some reimagining of what public safety means, and maybe that's something that is a bit more systematic of a question than for just city council. But I think that's like the major question here is like, what can they do and how can they keep the public involved, and how can they make it not this, walled off thing that nobody knows what's going on up there.
Yeah.
I'm also curious to see if they are going to switch gears from HDR, just because some of, the concerns over it, if they're going to be looking at some of the other proposals that they got.
Did they get other proposals?
It seems that way. They had like an open request for proposals last fall.
So we could use another company, not just, it could be somebody else, just another master plan, same idea, but not HDR at the helm of it.
Right. It does seem like they have other options. Yeah.
Are there any other options for the land itself? Like, say we let the lease run out without a plan, it goes back to the feds. I saw someone in the mayor's office suggest that it could become an ICE detention facility, which hit me as the wildest thing to say without evidence, like even as a worst case scenario.
Yeah, I'm not sure about what the actual specific steps would be if it did go back to the federal government. I think that they would obviously have ultimate say of whether or not, they would approve a reapplication by the city, or if they would, approve an appeal. But yeah, the ideas about it possibly being an ICE facility were kind of like, seemed like an offhand comment in council. And then in my follow-up interviews, people were like, well, we're not certain that could be the case. But there is also, an uncertainty of what this federal administration could do or would want to do.
Yeah, I think there's always that fear that like we have no idea what could happen next. But that comment also hit me like a little bit as maybe fear mongering.
Yeah, there was definitely no evidence to back it up. Yeah.
So are we just stuck now? Like, we applied for public safety when we took this deed over from the feds. So whatever we do, it has to be public safety.
Yeah. If they want to use it for something that's not public safety, they would probably have to let the contract run up and then reapply to the federal government to, acquire it for a different use. Because there were other options that they could have applied for. They could have applied for it to be housing. It just depended on, what federal agency basically it was applied for. Mm-hmm. But they are kind of locked into this contract now that it has to be used for these specific purposes. And the GSA, it was either GSA or the Department of Justice, I can't remember, has the right to inspect the land and make sure it's being used for the contract purposes. So I think that...
So we can't pull a fast one and say it's for public safety and then actually build some affordable housing.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I think that they would just have to reapply or petition for an appeal or something, which it doesn't seem like the city is super confident that would work.
More bureaucracy. We'll keep watching what you report, Ember. Thank you so much for keeping track of this and letting us know what's going on.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
You can find Ember's story, the full story, all the details at publicsource.org. That is all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. Before we go, one quick favor. CityCast is still doing the annual listener survey, and it really, really helps us if you take it. You can find it at citycast.fm/survey. It takes about 7 minutes to do, and it really does help us talk to people about who we reach and why that's important. And we really want to be here for years to come, and things like this make that possible. That's citycast.fm/survey. And if you give us your information at the end, totally optional, you'll also be eligible to win a $250 Visa gift card and some CityCast Pittsburgh swag. Even if you took it last year, please take it again. We can't use last year's stuff, so we want to hear from you now. Again, citycast.fm/survey. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. We'll talk to you soon.
I'm sure you guys know social media law is just a mess.